How's it going, everybody? Spencer Urquhart here. NOLA Preps Friday Night Live. Second round, regional round action in the books. Here with Chris, Dabe, and Joe Halm. Ready to recap the regional round and talk to y'all about the quarterfinals here as we head into the stretch run of the 2025 high school football playoffs. They had some interesting scores here as we pull up the scoreboard. We'll start it off with the New Orleans game that Chris was at, featuring two 9-5A schools, Carr and Jesuit. Carr comes away with a 39-13 win. Chris, talk to us about how that game played out.
Yeah, that game was actually scoreless through the first quarter, but John Johnson kind of took over from that point forward. He's the dual threat quarterback for Carr. He had 6 touchdowns tonight, 3 rushing, 3 passing, and his first 2 touchdowns both came on runs where it looked like they were kind of pass plays that he just saw open field and took off running. The first one was a 3rd and 13 play. I think it was 29 yards. And he just dropped back and saw open half of the field. And I asked him about it afterwards. He said, well, when they drop 8 in coverage, there's nobody on the quarterback. So he just figures he can take it, and he's experienced enough to know what to do. He's been a starter for 3 years now. And then the next one on the next series, it was a high shotgun snap that he kind of corralled. He tipped it up in the air and caught it. And I guess right there, he just saw an opening again, and he kind of weaved through the defense. And that made it 14-0. And with Carr's defense playing as well as it is, a 14-point lead is pretty hard for any team to overcome. Yeah, and then they just kind of added to the lead from there. Jesuit did score a couple of touchdowns in the second half. Manny Vanderweg, the sophomore quarterback. Jesuit played 2 quarterbacks tonight. Taylor Norton, the senior, started, but Manny came in off and on, and he kind of gave him a spark. And I kind of thought about their game against Brother Martin early in the year. That was a game where Jesuit was down a couple of scores, and Manny Vanderweg came in and kind of led them to a comeback where they had the lead until Brother Martin made the winning field goal at the end. And so he kind of did a little bit of that here tonight. But yeah, it was definitely all Carr's game all along. A couple of things to fix for them. They had 15 penalties for 160 yards, and certainly you can't continue playing that way against the competition as it gets better, starting next week with Evangel. I do remember covering their jamboree. First half of the game, Jesuit had 4 personal fouls in the first half, and Bryce Brown said afterwards, "Oh, they're just used to playing against each other in practice, but to clean that up for, when they have actual referees out there." So without them playing last week, I kind of suspect it's the same thing where they, they need to get back into actual game mode with real referees out there rather than just beating on each other in practice like I imagine they do.
Gotcha. Yeah, a lot of teams were on bye last week. 3 New Orleans area teams in the Division I select bracket of Carr, St. Augustine, and John Curtis. And I'll go over the John Curtis game. I was there. They played St. Thomas More, and that was all Curtis. 49-7. Patriots dominate, set the tone. Jacoby Boudreaux finishes with, I believe, 125 rushing yards and had the first 3 touchdowns of the game. He didn't even touch the ball in the second half. Didn't need to. He told me after the game he was a little banged up, but feels like he'll be good to go for the quarterfinals. But yeah, Curtis just dominated. They had over 300 rushing yards as a team. STM had no answers for their run-heavy offense. And a London Paget, the sophomore QB, was solid, completed passes when needed. And yeah, he just took advantage of early turnovers too. St. Thomas More quarterback Cole Bergeron had 2 interceptions in the first quarter. So between that and just STM failing to really have an answer for Curtis's running game, it ended up a pretty lopsided game there at the Shrine on the Airline. And I know St. Aug also played in Acadiana area team in the Acadiana High Wrecking Rams. Chris, talk to us a little bit about that one. Our freelancer Andrew Valenti was out there. Looked like a pretty exciting game there. 55-42 St. Aug.
Yeah, we sent Andrew probably to the game of the night. And, that one was, I could kind of follow the score as it went along. And Acadiana was up 14-0, and then St. Aug made it 30-14 with a run there. But at some point it was tied 42-all, and from that point, Khalil Lewis, the sophomore running back, he scored the final 2 touchdowns for St. Aug to put them up. But Marshawn Coulon threw for over 300 yards and 4 touchdowns, and that was kind of almost like a typical night for him with that passing total. So, but Acadiana, they run that veer offense. That's everyone says it's kind of similar to Curtis, but it's different. And St. Aug had just played Curtis a couple of weeks ago, but certainly it seems like Acadiana was able to kind of make something out of what they usually do and make that game interesting. But it's not surprising to see St. Aug put up all the points that they do like that. They have such an explosive offense, and I think as far as they can get into the playoffs, they're going to need that. That's how they're going to win games with that explosive offense. They kind of remind me a little bit of what Carr did last year offensively, with being able to just have that quick strike offense, so they can put up a lot of points real fast. And if they're going to give up a point total in the 40s, they're going to have to score, obviously, that way, and they're certainly capable of doing that.
For sure. And St. Aug will move on to face Rummel in the quarterfinals, a rematch, District 9-5A rematch. Rummel went on the road against Tioga and came away with a 45-21 win. Brother Martin also went on the road, fell short to Alexandria 38-27. Bonneville also went on the road against Turlings, fell short there 55-22. Yeah, a lot of area scores there in the Division One select. We'll let Joe chime in here. I talked to us a little bit about St. Paul's. They fell short tonight to Evangel. So give us your thoughts on the Wolves.
Yeah, I mean, I think they acquitted themselves well. They had some injuries. Cody Corrales and Adam Connell, they're two of the running backs, both were injured in the game. Went up 14-13 early. Brent West had a 10-yard pick six in the first quarter. In the first half, it was down 20-14 at half, and then Evangel just sort of pulled away in the second half. I mean, they put up a bunch of points. The Eagles do, and to hold them to 34 on a night like this, I thought was about a number that they could think they could win at. The offense just couldn't quite score enough. And I mean, I'm really interested in that Carr Evangel game. I think that's going to be a really fun game. An offense like that going against a defense like Carr's, which I think is a step up from St. Paul's, just based on what Chris has said all season. I think that'll be a fun environment, and I think Evangel with all that experience is welcoming that road trip.
For sure. Yeah, quarterfinal matchups in the Division One select bracket. Evangel going to travel to Morris Jeff to face Carr. Alexandria will travel to face Catholic. Catholic took down Captain Shreve. The winner of Carr, Evangel, will play the winner of Catholic Alexandria. And then on the other side of bracket, St. Aug and Rummel scheduled for Friday at Tag Gormley. And then Curtis will travel to Turlings, take on the number 2 seeded Rebels there on the road in Lafayette.
Yeah, and so you got Rummel and St. Aug playing, so you're guaranteed of a 9-5A score getting into the semifinals, and it's reasonable to think that Carr might get there. They're going to face a pretty good challenge there at that Evangel team with Pop Houston at quarterback and LSU commit. And somebody had told me that a couple weeks ago, maybe last week, Richard Anderson and Aiden Hall of Carr, they were making an LSU visit, and Pop Houston was there as well, and they were already kind of talking back and forth about this quarterfinal game that they have coming up. So certainly it doesn't seem like they overlooked their opponents from tonight, looking ahead to their quarterfinal. But I think there's certainly going to be a lot of hype around that game with LSU commitments on both sides of the ball. But we're guaranteed of a 9-5A school in the semifinals, and I only note that because this is the third or the fourth year of the expanded select field in the playoffs, and every year on each semifinal, there's been at least one 9-5A school in there, and so I think that just kind of speaks to the obvious strength of the district, and all the coaches will say it's like the SEC of high school football, and it kind of shows in some respects where you always have these teams that getting this far in the playoffs. I mean, they beat each other up in the regular season and sometimes get a lower seed than they otherwise might deserve based on their actual skill. Rummel's probably an example of that, of having to go on the road and winning tonight, and kind of reminds me a couple of years ago when they got to the semifinals by winning 3 straight road games with I think they were a 19 seed, but certainly better than your typical 19 seed. So see how it all unfolds next week.
For sure. Yeah, a lot of interesting matchups there in that bracket 3 involving New Orleans area teams. So we'll shift gears a little bit here to Division I non-select. Kind of maybe one of the upsets of the night here. Ouachita Parish taking down Destrehan 21-19. Wildcats were a 3 seed. Used to making deep playoff runs, made the semifinals last year, but yeah, disappointing game there for Destrehan. Hanville gave the 6 seed Parkway a good run, but ended up falling a little short there. I believe the score was, if I could find it there, 37-31 Parkway. And the Mandeville Skippers, Joe, fall to Neville 31-14.
Yeah, it's a tough road trip they made their young team in terms of the freshman quarterback, Drew Calora. He threw for about just under 300 yards. Jake Giacchetti had 85 yards receiving. And I think that was just a good learning experience for the Skippers, right? When Ben Hendricks went down in week 1, it was sort of like when Nate Shepard went down in week 9. We knew their ceiling got a little bit lower in terms of what they thought they could do. And I think they acquitted themselves really well. And I mean, Drew Calora, I'm going to talk about him a lot. I mean, we talked about Nate Shepard a lot his 3 years when he took over. And I think Drew Calora is on a trajectory like that in Mandeville where he's a guy, if he stays healthy, a left-handed quarterback who played like he did as a freshman, especially on the road in the first round last week. I mean, the kid's got some skill, and he's someone to look out for on the North Shore for the next 3 years.
For sure. And Chris, what are your thoughts on those the St. Charles Parish schools there?
Yeah, with Hanville, I saw that they were going to overtime against Parkway, and I hadn't seen the Destrehan score, so I was thinking, man, if Hanville can pull through, you'd have a quarterfinal of Hanville and Destrehan playing each other, and turns out both of them lost. Destrehan won. Obviously, that's surprising. It seems like every year they're in the semifinals if they're not in the state finals. I think I covered them a few years ago, and they lost in the quarterfinal. So just usually they're just always there that Thanksgiving week, getting ready for a quarterfinal game. So it's quite surprising to see the 21-19 score there, without having many details from the game. Still, it's a surprise. But Hanville, they seem like they're a program continuing to rise with Coach Greg Boyan, and he came over from Destrehan. This is his second year there. They had a good year last year and another good year this year. They'll have a starting quarterback coming back, and certainly some things to build on. That matchup next year will probably be for a district title.
For sure. The Division II select had some blowouts there. St. Charles blew past Northside. Not a surprise there. Number 1 seeded St. Charles figured they'd come away with the win there. Number 7 seed Shaw with the win over Haynes there, 49-6, 7-10 matchup there. Shaw Eagles, defending state champions. They'll be traveling to take on Loyola Prep in the next round. St. Charles will be taking on E.D. White in the quarters, team that I believe faced Shaw in the state title game last year. Then Kennedy was looking good against Madison Prep, but ended up falling 42-26 in that one. Prep moves on to face U High, a rematch of Baton Rouge schools there. And then Carver was taking on Vanderbilt Catholic, but the Carver Rams see their season come to an end. Vanderbilt Catholic moves on to face Lake Charles College Prep in the quarters.
Yeah, that St. Charles score 56-7. I feel like when you see a score like that in the second round of the playoffs, that's just a good team kind of taking care of business like they should. Didn't let anyone hang around, and wouldn't expect anything less from a top-seeded St. Charles team with Wayne Stein there as coach. I think we mention his name every week on this show for some reason. But and then same could be said kind of for Shaw. They're a 7 seed this year, but winning 49-6, and Jim Derry covered that game for us, and that was a shutout deep into the game. They had a running clock going. And last week you had asked about that game, and I thought, maybe Haynes, I mean, they put up some good numbers. You think maybe they can give them a challenge? And I thought about it actually afterwards that, I mean, Shaw still has a state championship defense from last year. They returned 9 players from the team that won in the Dome. And so, when things are going well, even if their offense is struggling, they should be tough to score against. And they're going to face Loyola Prep, which won 42-0. So presumably they're scoring lots of points, but still, regardless of what Shaw does offensively. They do have a pretty strong defense, and I'm looking at Loyola Prep's schedule, and I'm seeing 54 points, 62 points, 71 points, 60, 56 points a couple times. So they can put up a lot of points too. So that'll be certainly the matchup there, the Shaw defense against the Loyola Prep offense.
For sure. Yeah, should be a fun game there. And shifting to Division II non-select, Bell Chase able to scrape a win there over Opelousas 7-6. Bell Chase moving on in the quarters. They'll be taking on the 11 seed West Feliciana, who upset the 6 seed Bruley 27-24. And number 4 seed Lakeshore, Joe, I know you covered that one. Titans, though, fall short to the defending state champion Cecilia in a high scoring back and forth game. Joe, tell us about that one.
Yeah, over 1,000 yards of total offense, and I mean, this game's 28-14 at halftime. Lakeshore looks like they're doing just fine. Celia comes out, fakes a punt, scores on that drive, then recovers 2 consecutive onside kicks. They don't take the lead. The first one they take advantage of. Lakeshore blocks an extra point, preserving the 1-point lead, and then Lakeshore gets an interception after the second onside kick. They're thinking they're turning the tide. Cecilia is able to get the stop scores, and then it just becomes a track meet. I mean, Braylon Callis is a special kid. I mean, he took over that game. Cecilia lost their quarterback, Colin Dior, in the second quarter to a high ankle sprain. And Braylon just went in and said, "This is my game. I'm gonna take it over." And he really did. He's a special player. Coach Inda said after the game, he's probably one of the top 2 or 3 players he's had to game plan / play against. I mean, he's that good of a player as only a junior, and he's the reason Celia was able to pull this one out. His speed and the whole team's speed was able to just make Lakeshore tacklers miss at times, pull away. They were able to just sort of grind this one out. And Lakeshore's offense, I mean, Brody Loudermilk did a great job, ran for over 200 yards, passed for over 100 yards, had 4 combined touchdowns, really kept them in this game. But Cecilia was just too much. And you talk about, Chris mentioned it with Rummel, of, good teams getting lower seeds than they should. Cecilia isn't a 13 seed. And I think a lot of people knew that after their state title run last year at 18. But, man, that's a really good football team. That's the quarterfinal, semifinal game I watched tonight. And Lakeshore was just unlucky to come out on the wrong end.
For sure. Yeah, kind of a bad draw for the Titans there, unfortunately. So, yeah, we'll move on here to Division III select. Newman, the Greenies come away with the win over Holy Savior Menard, 42-13. They'll be taking on the 5 seed Dunham, who rolled past Northlake Christian 62-3. Country Day was on the road against Calvary Baptist. Calvary comes away with a 66-30 win. And De La Salle, also on the road, is 18 seed against number 2 Notre Dame. Kept it close there, but Notre Dame ends up victorious 28-19. What are your thoughts on that Newman-Dunham matchup, Chris? I think that's one a lot of people are going to have their eye on.
Yeah, that should be obviously much anticipated and a good one. You got 2 teams that look like they can put up some points, and just looking at Dunham's schedule this year, the last they played, counting their playoff game, 8 games in a row, scoring in the 40s. The only loss being to St. Charles. So that's what, a 10-1 team with 1 loss to a 1 seed in the playoffs. So that they're certainly battle tested. And Newman has done nothing but take care of business since they started 0-2. And one of those losses also was to St. Charles. So you got 2 teams that have lost to St. Charles playing each other, and the other loss for Newman came against Riverside. And we talked about Newman many times here on the Friday nights with Jake Randall and everything he's been able to do at quarterback after moving from running back. So that's going to be a good one as far as that goes. And then kind of touching on the Country Day, they're losing 66-30, and that's 2 teams that have a lot of capability of putting up a lot of points. But I'm guessing Calvary just probably a little more experience and a little more depth in terms of what they're able to do with all the scoring they've done. It's the first year for Coach Powell there at Country Day, and kind of putting in a spread offense. And he's got some kids that are coming back next year, with like Curtis McAllister and Kellen Brewer, up to find a new quarterback. So we'll see if they're running that same kind of spread offense. But it's pretty impressive how they just put that in this year and were able to put up the points that they did.
For sure. And a couple other ones. Riverside comes away with a big win. I believe over Delta Charter there. They scored over 60 points. The Rebels will advance to face number 7 seed Washita Christian, who shut out Southern Lab as a 7 seed. No upset there. Washita Christian made their presence known. Riverside there, 63-6 over Delta Charter. So that should be a good quarterfinals matchup there against two blue blood programs. And then South Plaquemine grinds out a 6-0 win over West St. Mary, the defending state champion Hurricanes. Will be taking on a 6-seeded North Iberville, who took down Elton 36-20.
Yeah, and Riverside putting up all the points they did, kind of the same thing as St. Charles, where it's just a good team kind of doing what they ought to do in a second round game when they're the much higher seed and not leaving any doubt as far as who the better team is out there. And that is, as we talked about in past Friday nights, that's an experienced team that's got a lot of kids in good positions that played in the Dome 2 years ago. Of course, Washita Christian is no stranger to making deep runs in the playoffs. So I'm surprised to see that as a quarterfinal matchup. If I hadn't looked at the brackets before tonight, and you said that was the game, I'd be thinking that's a semifinal or state championship type of game.
Yeah, for sure. So, yeah, we'll have a lot of good quarterfinals matchups next week on the horizon. Should be fun. We'll be back same time, same channels next week. So, yeah, we're almost done, y'all, but we got a few more weeks to go. So, excited to see how those go down. So, for Chris, Dabe, and Joe Halm, this has been Spencer Urquhart for NOLA Prep Friday Night Live. We'll see y'all next week.